Thank you, Anna, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Anna, for being here with us and for giving me the opportunity to organize and moderate this seminar. It's really a pleasure to see so many of you joining us today and to welcome you to this new seminar of the I-LanD seminar series. For those of you who may be new to I-LanD, just a very quick word. The I-LanD Inter-University Research Center brings together colleagues working in different fields, linguistics, social studies, and humanities in general, with a specific focus on the concepts of diversity and identity. Now, as for the seminar series, the idea is to keep things quite open and informal. So rather than formal lectures, these seminars are meant to be spaces for discussion, where we can share ideas, reflect on ongoing work, and also raise questions. And today's seminar is very much in that spirit. The title is Artificial Intelligence in English Language and Translation, Bridging Research and Practice. And this idea of bridging is really at the core of what we are doing today, because AI is not just something that is entering language education and translation, but it's really starting to reshape both in quite significant ways. It's changing how languages are taught, how they're learned, how they are used, and also how we think about expertise in these fields. But at the same time, AI is no longer just a tool. In many cases, it's starting to act more like a kind of cognitive partner, and sometimes even something closer to an instructional presence. And all this, of course, raises quite a few questions. For instance, what happens to educators' agency in AI-mediated environments? How do we make sure that the use of AI remains meaningful and responsible? What does it mean to work with AI as a translator and as a language professional? And also, what happens when these technologies are used in contexts that are already unequal or fragile? So these are some of the questions, some of the broader questions that frame today's discussion. When putting this seminar together, the idea was really to bring into conversation different perspectives from language education, translation, educational technology, and also policy and governance. But what all our speakers today have in common is that they work very much between research and practice. So the goal today is not just to present ideas, but to reflect on how these ideas actually work in real contexts. Very briefly, just to give you a sense of how the different contributions connect, we'll start with Ezgi Aydemir Altaş, who will focus on AI in language education, and in particular on AI literacy and educator agency. Then Elif Buber will also look at language education and translation, but from the perspective of context and the importance of maintaining fidelity, inclusion, and human agency when working with AI. Alessia Chiriatti will take us into a different context, looking at AI and education in situations of displacement. So we will reflect together with Alessia on questions of governance and educational quality. Then Marián Kabát will focus more on translation, so on how AI is changing both professional practice and the way we teach translation. And finally, Achilleas Kostoulas will bring in an ethical perspective, outlining some key principles for the responsible use of AI in language education. So these are quite different perspectives, but also very much connected, and they will really speak to each other as we move into the discussion. But just a couple of quick practical points before going into our presentations. We'll start with the individual presentations. I'll introduce each speaker one by one. Each speaker will have around 10 minutes. After that, we'll move into a discussion among the speakers. I'll bring in a few guiding questions, but the idea is really to open up a dialogue between them. And then in the final part, we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So please feel free to note down any questions or comments as we go along. Okay, so I think we can start. Our first speaker is Ezgi Aydemir Altaş. She is an English instructor and researcher with over 16 years of experience in higher education, working on AI, educational technology, and language learning. She will be talking about AI literacy and educator agency in language education, and what this means for educators working with AI today. Ezgi, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for being here with us from Turkey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation, especially Francesca and Elif. Thank you everyone for joining this event. So let me start with a question actually, and I want you to sit with it. If your students handed in beautifully written essays today, coherent, well-structured, grammatically flawless, no errors at all, no problems, but couldn't remember a single sentence from them tomorrow, would that count as language learning? So that is not a hypothetical question, actually. A 2025 MIT Media Lab study measured brain activity via EEG as 54 participants wrote essays using ChatGPT, a search engine, or no tools at all. And ChatGPT users showed up to 55% lower cognitive engagement. And 83% couldn't recall key points from their own essays immediately afterwards. The researchers called this cognitive debt. I should be transparent about this study because this is a preprint, not yet peer-reviewed, and it has drawn some criticism because of its methodology. However, the signal is hard to ignore and particularly timely for everyone here. So we're not here to debate whether AI belongs in our field. That debate is over. But the main question is what kind of relationship we're building with it. The data is genuinely mixed about this. A 2025 meta-analysis of 46 empirical studies found a statistically significant medium to large effect of AI on language learning. The G number was 0.74. AI works in measurable ways. But at Stanford's AI and Education Summit, Dean Daniel Schwartz put it plainly, a lot of AI is also going to automate really bad ways of teaching. I want to map that tension through three concepts every language and translation educator should have in their vocabulary right now. So the first one is cognitive offloading. So the question isn't whether to offload mental work to AI. It's what. So when students delegate lower order tasks and focus their own energy on analysis and argumentation, critical thinking can actually improve. Strategic offloading can legitimate pedagogy. The second one is cognitive surrender, where AI output replaces thinking altogether. A PNAS study involving nearly 1,000 Turkish high school students found that those with ChatGPT access completed 48% more practice problems, but scored 17% lower on tests afterwards. So in language education, this struggle with form and meaning is not a side effect of learning. It is the learning. So when AI removes that struggle, we have a problem. And this looks different in translation. When translation students accept AI output without questioning what got lost, what got flattened, they're not learning to translate. Actually, they're just learning to approve what ChatGPT gives them as options. The third is hyper personalization. It sounds ideal, but here's a question. If a learner never encounters a text that feels too difficult, a perspective that they didn't ask for, or a task that creates productive discomfort, are we personalizing education, or are we insulating learners from the very friction that produces growth? So there's also growing evidence that excessive AI-generated feedback erodes a writer's sense of ownership over their own text. The tool is rarely the decisive factor here. The pedagogy around it is. And PISA 2029 will introduce a new assessment domain, which is MAIL, Media and Artificial Intelligence Literacy. So the first draft framework was published in January 2026, results expected later in December 2031. And UNESCO's AI Competency Framework for Teachers, launched in 2024, was designed to give education systems the scaffolding to build this kind of critical relationship with AI, because policy frameworks can require it, but cannot by themselves create it. So AI literacy is no longer a supplementary skill. It's becoming a globally benchmarked competency. And if our students will be assessed on it in the future, the question of whether their teachers are prepared becomes urgent, not aspirational. Which brings me to the part of the talk that I find kind of like uncomfortable, but TALIS 2024, TALIS, the OECD's survey of 280,000 teachers across 55 education systems, investigated teachers' relationships with AI for the first time, and the findings are striking. Only 1 in 3 global teachers globally use AI in their teaching. Of those who don't, 75% say they lack the knowledge and skills. They don't feel competent. AI was the single highest professional development need, cited by the 29% of teachers. And yet, simultaneously, about half felt AI shouldn't be used in teaching at all. Striking, I think. That is not contradiction. That is what it looks like when a profession is navigating a profound shift without adequate preparation. That is the issue. And a 2025 systematic review found no prominent cluster dedicated to teacher profession development in AI education research. It's a structural gap, a major implementation risk. And the deeper the risk isn't that teachers use AI ineffectively. It's that without critical frameworks, they begin to defer to the system to let the tool set the agenda. Teacher agency doesn't disappear through any single dramatic decision. It erodes quietly through accumulated moments of difference. And these struggles, these challenges do not land equally. Brookings' research from 2024 documented how AI language technologies systematically underserve lower research languages. When we talk about the global benchmark, we have to ask. Therefore, we have to ask these questions: for whom and on whose terms? And what this means in practice is that how do we use AI effectively matters. But it is not the correct primary question. It is the wrong one. The real question is, how do we maintain critical awareness, pedagogical intentionality, and genuine human agency in a learning environment where AI is increasingly the default cognitive partner? How? And a 2025 study of 580 students found that AI dependence lowered critical thinking. Not surprising, actually, but information literacy buffered that effect. The antidote is not less AI, it is more deliberate teaching. In practice, we can like just design tasks where the struggle is the point. Be explicit about what AI cannot do. In translation especially, fluency and fidelity are not the same thing. And push your institutions to treat AI literacy as a real priority, not a checkbox to be ticked. And we are the first generation of language and translation educators preparing their students, we're preparing students that global assessment systems will formally hold them accountable for AI literacy. And we are the people who have to decide consciously what kind of human-AI relationship we are modeling and enabling. So here is my final question. Think about it. In 10 years, when your students look back at how language was taught and translation was trained during this transition, will they say their teachers helped them think more deeply or that their teachers helped them produce more quickly? Those two goals are not the same. And right now, the difference between them depends on us, on the educators, trainers. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And I was taking some notes. Thank you for setting the scene so clearly. And I think these the issue of being the first generations of trainers that can shape the way learners will work with AI and also how trainers will work with AI. I think this is quite fascinating, also challenging, but fascinating. And also, the focus on critical thinking and how it connects to working with AI in educational context. Well, we'll have time to come back to these points later in the discussion. But building on this idea of AI, not just a tool, but as something that actively shapes how we engage with language, our next speaker takes us further into the importance of context in how AI is used and understood. Our next speaker is Elif Buber. Elif is a learning, design, and technology specialist with over 25 years of experience working at the intersection of education, technology, and intercultural communication. She has also been involved in research projects with CAST in the US, the Center for Applied Special Technology that developed the Universal Design for Learning framework. In her talk, Elif will focus on what she calls contextual AI and why context is essential for meaningful and effective communication in both language education and translation. Elif will also reflect on key dimensions such as fidelity, human agency, and accessibility and inclusion. So Elif, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you all for joining us. And actually, after to be the next speaker after Ezgi is so nice because she has raised so many points that are relevant to contextual AI. So I am working at the intersection of technology, particularly neuroscience education, and how to integrate technology and AI into education from a neuroscience perspective, particularly UDL, for the last 8 years. And contextual AI is my focus regarding AI because it has been recently arrived to the point we have aimed for. Like in 2023, just the Meta researchers have launched their company, Contextual AI, and it can answer many of our concerns as educators and translators. However, it is far-fetched from the ideal, of course, because I will tell you why. And considering that we may have audience here who are not very knowledgeable about contextual AI, I would like to start with the definition, because as an educator and as a translator, particularly giving paying attention to localization, because this is the critical point in translation and language education. So I want to start with the definitions first. So what is context? So if there are any students joining us today, so what is context? It is an A2 level vocabulary according to Oxford Dictionary. So it means that according to the definition of Oxford Dictionary, it means that words that come just before and after a word, phrase, or statement that help us understand its meaning. So meaning is the key word in education and in translation, because whatever we do should be meaningful, and we have to create the meaning out of it. As Ezgi also pointed out, that the critical question is how effectively, how ethically, and how pedagogically we integrate technology. The question is not whether we should integrate technology or we should keep away from technology. So regarding that, it is very critical word. Context is a very critical word to teach in any language, starting from A2 levels, including our native languages and literature courses, actually, as well as translation courses. So it is very critical word to know deeply, to understand also AI and machine learning, as well as human brain and learning. So my particular focus is learning sciences. So I have been reviewing lots of literature on learning mechanisms of our brains, which is neuroscience of learning. So let's move into what is contextual AI then. So it is the new breakthrough in AI after generative AI. So as I said, it has been only developed after 2020s. So in 2019, Adobe was talking about contextual AI, and they were saying that we are far-fetched from contextual AI. And only after in 2022, we have come across ChatGPT, and I'm holding a research in front of me, published by Cambridge University Press in 2025. And the article is Generative AI and English Language Teaching, a Global English's Perspective. So when we say global English's perspective, it means that we are talking about contextual AI, because our contexts where we teach English, where we translate English, right, are different. So it requires a global perspective to English. So it is called global English's perspective. So what it says, the research says, in short, generative AI offers potential for English language teaching, but it has pedagogical limitations in multilingual contexts. This is something Ezgi also raised concern, and I'm sure our next speakers will tap into that too, because it is our common and shared concern, to the best of my knowledge. And it says generative AI's pedagogical implications include teacher collaboration, which we may all agree, teacher professional development, educators' agentive role in orchestrating diverse resources alongside generative AI. And this article is very important, understanding contextual AI. So if you have time and if you're interested in, you may read it. So let me skip to what is contextual AI. So it is the new breakthrough in AI after generative AI. And you may remember, people of my age may remember the 1980s TV series Knight Rider, maybe. It is the black car which can talk to the owner. And it shows actually K-I-T-T, I don't remember the name of the car, but probably a black car called K-I-T-T. And it shows actually it was theoretical and imaginative at that time, but it shows the principles of true contextual AI that we aim for today. I'm saying aim for because we haven't reached there yet. We have come a lot on the way, but we are so far away from reaching to it. So it has three main things that it can do, you may remember. The car could explain his decisions and reasoning to the owner when the owner asks. The car could adapt its learning to different environments. If they were driving in the mountains and in the city, it can adapt it to the different contexts. And the control of the car was on the control of the car looked like on the car, but actually the owner has the agency. So this is the main point. So this is the point where we would like to reach in contextual AI. It is still, the car is still far-fetched and fictional, of course, but the essence is that contextual AI have a deeper understanding of human minds, situations, and perceptions, that it has the capability to reach the level of humans, what humans can do, and with their brains, not only with their intelligence. So intelligence and our brains are not the same things. Unfortunately, today they are used interchangeably, but intelligence is just one function of our brains. So what is contextual AI then? It is the neuroscience of connectivity and neural networks thing of AI. So it is also what we can do with our minds. So when we say minds, it is human level perception, human level consciousness, human level judgment, human level ethical considerations. Of course, some researchers believe that we can reach to that level, but some researchers do not agree because human mind is so huge. So it was not until 1954 MIT succeeded in running the first artificial neural network, like computer simulation of brain, and it had only 128 neurons, and they call it perceptrons. So perceptrons are the technological term for machines perception. So that we can come closer to human minds, not human intelligence. We are so close to human intelligence, and some researchers believe that it's beyond human intelligence. They may be right, but when it comes to human mind, we have to work on perceptrons. So this is a keyword to keep in mind for contextual AI today. So what is perception then in humans? So maybe you are familiar with the name Huberman. So he is famous in the United States, in the world, with his podcast. And he defines perception as, actually, he's a Stanford University professor in the School of Medicine, in the Department of Neurobiology. So he's a very knowledgeable researcher, professor, and podcaster, trying to explain widespread the birth of contextual AI to the world. So he defines perception as sensations that we focus on at a given time. So it is the incredible and like a maze and like an incredible thing that we cannot develop understanding yet. So human perception is huge. So this is the point contextual AI company, which is launched in 2023. It has been working on achieving. However, we have achieved a little bit, but the human brain has 68 billion neurons. Each has the capacity to connect to each other like around 10,000 each time. So it is so huge that we are not sure we can come closer to human mind, not intelligence. And if we can come closer, it has huge implications for ELT, English language teaching and translation, because these may be the answer to our concerns, as well as the advantages of AI bringing the advantages of AI. So, Francesca, how much time I have? Sorry, I'm lost with time.
A couple of minutes or so.
Okay, so let me wrap up. So the keywords in my title is, let me finish with the keywords, and I have lots of things to say about the implications of ELT and translation, but let me wrap up with the keywords in my title, and we can talk about the implications of contextual AI for language teaching and translation in the question and answer session. So my title is Contextual AI in English Language Learning and Translation. And the goal is improving effective AI usage. I would like to add, after Ezgi's comments, that it is effective doesn't mean technically effective. Effective means ethically effective. Effective means pedagogically effective. Effective means keeping not keeping human agency, including teachers, translators, learners, not in the loop, but at the center. So this is effective AI usage and communication to support fidelity, human agency, and accessibility inclusion. So what is fidelity? So all language teachers and translators should focus on this word, because fidelity means, in the Oxford Dictionary definition, so it is the degree to which the output of any system accurately describes or reflects the input to the system. So it is, in short, simply put, being loyal to the original meaning. So fidelity is used especially in the processes of replication, translation, transcription, and any electronic amplifiers. What I mean by this is like letting students use ChatGPT in our classes or AI in our classes. So this is called electronic amplifiers. So fidelity is the keyword. So the next keyword is accessibility and inclusion. So it is very clear to most of us, but let me just say, AI being accessible to people and learners of all backgrounds, not exclusive of any cultures, any languages, any global Englishes. So this is called accessibility and inclusion. What I mean by accessibility and inclusion in my title. And human agency is the most critical one. And I think the other speakers also will tap into that. But so what I mean human agency, actually, it is the most controversial term in the world right now. So many researchers and many educators and translators are discussing this word. But I'm taking the definition from OECD. So it is the common ground of all of us. So OECD learning compass 23 definition of human agency. It is the capacity to set a goal, reflect, and act responsibly to effect change. So it is about acting rather than being acted upon. It is shaping rather than being shaped. And it is making responsible decisions and choices rather than accepting those determined by others. So it's not AI making the decisions, but teachers, translators, and learners making the decisions. It's not AI making the choices on behalf of us, but we are aware of what we are using, why we are using, how we are using AI. So another definition is from the New Zealand Ministry of Education initiative. It defines agency as about having the power combined with choices to take meaningful action. So as I said at the beginning of my talk, contextual AI is very important in terms of meaningful action. And the definition ends with seeing the result of those decisions. So we may not be able to make correct decisions all the time, but we should be able to evaluate the results of our decisions. So I will conclude with important reminders about the word agency. First of all, for all translators, it hasn't been translated into many world languages with fidelity yet. It is the OECD report. It's not what I am saying. Agency doesn't mean student autonomy and student choice. People learn, grow, and exercise their agency in social contexts. So we cannot just give the autonomy, full autonomy to students, to learners, to translators, whoever, to AI. It is like there is the term co-agency. So people learn, and machines also learn, grow and exercise their agency in social contexts. So in school context, students are surrounded by their peers, teachers, families, and communities, and technology and AI right now. So maybe they are more surrounded by technology and AI than others. So they all now have an impact on whom we are interacting with, and they all guide the students and learners and users of all of us, actually, technology towards well-being. So this is the concept of co-agency. So what we need in language, in translation, while teaching language, while learning languages, and while translating. So co-agency and context is the most important point that we should focus on. Thank you. That is all I can say about contextual AI. I have so many things to share about the implications to English language learning and teaching and translation, but I'm keeping them for the question and answer part. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you very much, Elif, especially for how can I say, unpacking the notion of context related to AI in terms of different dimensions. Yes, absolutely. We'll pick up on some of these issues later on in the discussion. And now we move into contexts of displacement and systemic instability with Alessia Chiriatti. Alessia leads the education program at the Istituto Affari Internazionali in Rome and works extensively on education governance in the Mediterranean and in post-conflict settings. Her contribution today looks at how educational quality is shaped not just by technology, but by governance structures, inequality, and access to knowledge, always related to technologies and AI. Alessia, thank you for being with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Francesca, for having me. Thank you also for the chance to put on the table some points, some elements that are related to research that actually is at the very first phase and on which I'm focusing. So I'm very, very happy to share with you some points, some elements, and very happy also to listen to you, to have questions, comments, and so on. So what I would like to share with you is the idea about the relationship between artificial intelligence and education in a context of displacement, of systemic instability. I started to focus specifically on some case studies in the Mediterranean space, and namely in Turkey and in Syria. I also added at a certain point also Lebanon, but at this moment I'm trying to narrow a bit my focus, and the starting point is maybe the main research question is relatively straightforward, but it's also analytically demanding, at least for what I'm seeing since now. Because in crisis-affected environments, the central issue is how educational quality is defined, is governed, and also is sustained under condition of uncertainty or fragmentation and unequal access to knowledge. So my point is that we have to focus on artificial intelligence, not just like a purely technical innovation, but as a governance issue. So a governance issue that can reshape priorities, redistribute responsibilities, and ultimately also reframes what we mean by quality education. And one of the main starting point is that the analysis is my analysis is at least focused and concentrated in context where displacement are no longer temporary. So we are facing protracted conflicts, especially considering the Mediterranean space and its neighboring countries, its periphery, and these conflicts have transformed instability into a structural condition. Sometimes, at least in political science and international relations, we are witnessing the use of some meaning, some definition regarding the so-called polycrisis, which means the presence of more than one crisis that happened at the same time with others. So we are facing several conflicts, several wars together with economic instability, democratic backsliding, and so on. But in context particularly characterized by wars and conflict, of course, instability is much more important and, of course, fundamental to be analyzed, related also to other services, not only to the basic needs of people. So not only taking into consideration the war as it is. So education system are, in this context, therefore, not just interrupted or rebuilt, they are forced to function continuously under stress. At the same time, digital technologies together with the artificial intelligence are increasingly promoted as a scalable solution to structural deficits such as the teacher shortages or infrastructural gaps or discontinuity. And this is, of course, one element that we noticed already, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic. So maybe before, we can say, the arrival on the educational scene of artificial intelligence in a such important way. So the use of digital technology, of distant learning was already important. Even before and even during the COVID-19 pandemic starting in 2019. So a central conceptual move is again the important to rethink the quality education related to all these elements that I already listed, because in displacement context, quality is often reduced to access, but is not, because access alone tells us very little about what education actually produces in social and political terms. And for this reason, I prefer to approach to the quality education like an element that is treated as a negotiated and relational outcome. And specifically because it emerges from interaction between multiple actors, especially consider not only states that are in some case study, like for example in Syria, in a transition phase with a regime change. But we can, of course, mentioning the importance of international organization, but more of the NGOs, together with the civil society, with teachers and also families. The quality education is also deeply shaped by temporality, because education only retains meaning if it is connected to credible futures. Last week, I invited one professor from the University of Gaza, at the University of Padua, where I'm teaching transnational security, with his very important and moving and touching experience of what is happening right now there in terms of education at the university. And he focused exactly on the terms of, together with dignity, of course, on terms regarding credible future, because he said that future is totally related to the quality education and to the lifelong learning for people who live there. So in prolonged displacement, this connection is often weak or uncertain. So, of course, quality education needs to be defined also in front of these elements. So artificial intelligence, by my side, is not just a neutral pedagogical tool. Of course, it is important to evaluate also the ethical meaning that the artificial intelligence brings with it. It is better, consequently, it is better understood as a governance instrument because it privileges efficiency, scalability, measurability, while from the other side can also marginalize relational and context sensitive dimension of education. And sometimes, and especially in fragile system, the artificial intelligence often operates as a compensatory mechanism. because it fills gap but does not transform structures. So consequently, it is important to ask also under which governance condition does the artificial intelligence reinforce or undermine from the other side the educational quality. So I just focus on those case studies that I already mentioned, so Syria and Turkey. Why? Because they represent, of course, two different but interconnected configuration of displacement and education governance. Of course, different situation, because Syria illustrates extreme fragmentation under a prolonged conflict, while Turkey represents a large-scale inclusion within a relatively strong and central.
I think Alessia disappeared somehow. I can't see. Yes, okay. Alessia, we missed you, but just like 2 seconds.
Oh, sorry. I don't
But
know.
just 2 seconds, so no worries.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
No problem.
Okay, so I mentioned the two case studies. So Syria as a case study characterized by war, by conflict, and Turkey that represent this large-scale inclusion within centralized state structure. But the contrast between these two case studies allow, I think, the research to observe how similar pressures, like, for example, the resource constraint, the international involvement, the instability in the neighboring countries, the mass displacement for the Syrian case study, produce different negotiation of educational quality. Taken together, and I'm concluding with these two sense, the two cases highlight some variables. From one side, the governance capacity, and from the other side, the temporality. Because where governance is fragmented, technology from the other side could fragment. And where governance is centralized but under strain, technology exposes institutional limits. And in both cases, I would say the artificial intelligence reflects existing structures rather than transforming them. So it does not neutralize inequalities, but it operates within them. So it is important also to consider these technological instruments also from this point of view. I think that understanding education as a multi-level and negotiated process is essential. Also, if we want to assess the real impact of technological innovation and to use this tool in a proper way, considering the different situation in which we operate, in terms also of partnership, collaboration with, again, civil society, universities, associations, and so on. And in this sense, it is again important that artificial intelligence does not fix education system in displacement context. It reveals how, in some way, they are governed, and also it gives us the chance to understand how we can implement some situation in a better way, especially for one side educators, but also for students who are, of course, at the center of the learning process. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very happy to listen to your comments or ideas. Thank you again.
Thank you, Alessia. I think this really helped us see how AI operates within existing constraints, and also how it is reshaping, as you said, the very notion of quality in education. So that was really interesting. This is something we'll take up again later. From here, we can move a bit closer to the field of translation itself, where we have different constraints, and to look more directly at what AI is changing in practice. So our next speaker is Marián Kabát. He's based at Comenius University in Bratislava, where he teaches translation, localization, and translation technologies. And he's also an active translator and localizer. He will explore how AI is reshaping translation from multiple perspectives, pedagogical, professional, and research related. And we will look together with Marián how workflows are changing, how the skills are evolving, and also the variability of AI as a methodological challenge. Marián, the floor is yours, and thank you for being here with us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you for the introduction. I have nothing more to add. And thank you to Ezgi and both Ezgi and Elif for already mentioning human in the loop and at the center, because this applies or should apply especially to translation as well. And I'm going to start with a thought, and I'm going to leave you with that thought for a while. When you look at translation from a historical perspective, translation always was a slow process. Like when you imagine those translators some 100 years ago, or when you look at pictures of Saint Jerome, who's the saint patron of translators, he was always pictured in a thinking pose and often holding like a skull, a human skull, and he's thinking. And so translation historically is a slow process. What AI does is that it tries to speed up the process. And that kind of clashes the slow part of translation and the fast part of AI. And we have to somehow master this process so that we as translators and we as educators of future translators are able to somehow grasp and add the fast of the AI into the slow of the translation. And so in translation teaching, this AI as a tool, when we look at AI as a standalone tool, it's not such a big difference to teach AI because it's just another tool. And our students already have tools. They have machine translation engines. They have CAT tools. So it's just another tool. But deep down, it's not just the tool that we need to teach. We need to teach our students competencies which we already taught, but we probably need to somehow switch the way we teach them. So we teach our students technological competencies, how to use new emerging technologies, but we also need to teach them ways to evaluate these technologies, because the student needs to be able to evaluate, for example, the machine translation engine, but also the AI engine. Is this specific AI useful for the task that I am supposed to do, or is it not? On top of that, we also need to strengthen their info mining competence. It is a well-known fact that AI tends to do hallucinations, and so we need to teach them that they need to find whether the output that they got from AI is actually useful for them. And again, we already did this. We already taught this before the age of AI, because they needed to Google something, right? And we call that Googling, learn to Google. But now they ask AI and they need to validate. And then it's also up to discussion whether it's even helpful to first ask AI and then validate, or whether it's not just simply faster to validate AI, in other words, Google the the problematic part from scratch, right? And then we also need to teach them translation competence. So basically being able to translate. All these tools, whether it's machine translation, whether it's AI, it's useless to them if they cannot, first and foremost, do translation. I'd say it in a old-fashioned way with pen on paper, right? They can't be good post editors if they don't know how a translation is supposed to look like. So as long as they can't do the slow thinking part, the speeding up part through AI won't work, or it won't help them create better outputs. And what this also means for the students, the skill to evaluate the technology, the skill to validate the technology, and the skill to effectively use the technology in the translation process. This all comes up to them being able to also take responsibility for the output they create. And this connects to ethics in translation, to ethics of technologies in translation, and so on and so forth. But the students need to understand first and foremost that without the slow part of translation, without the slow thinking part of the translation, it cannot be sped up. And this also applies to the translation industry as it is today, because AI had a huge impact on the translation industry. Because again, the translation industry, our clients in translation, the translation agencies, they expect everything to go fast, because AI enables the fast thing. But again, translation is a slow process. You can't speed it. If you try to speed it up too much, it won't be effective anymore. But the industry is about fast movement, fast turnaround times. We're always looking for ways to automate something, but all of this excludes the human from the loop and from the center especially. And so we also in the industry need to find ways to automate, to speed things up, but to not lose the responsibility of the outputs that we create or that we send back to our clients, for example. And another problem of this speeding up of machine translation and of AI especially is evaluating it. We basically, it's really difficult to evaluate LLM outputs, right? We can give it a prompt to translate a text from a source language into a target language. We can evaluate, compare the translation with the original. We can use different metrics for that, and get hard data. But behind these outputs is the variability of the engine, which basically means that if you ask an AI engine to translate the same text 3 times, 5 times, you will get different outputs. Some outputs might be better, some outputs might be worse. And which output are you going to use to form a judgment on the quality of the engine? Like, which one are you going to use to say, okay, this engine can't translate from English into Slovak well enough to be useful? And this is the problem of variability that we are trying to research somehow with my colleagues at the moment. So how to measure the quality of a large language model? How can we influence, or whether even we can somehow influence the variability, whether we can use some settings like temperature or top P to influence it, and what kind of methodology to apply in order to be able to evaluate the quality of the output, or whether we should have a new outlook on the quality of machine translation, which if we will have, we probably again need to take a step back and look at what our clients expect from the quality, whether we talk about fidelity or anything else, and then also how we teach our students how to progress to I don't want to call it good enough quality because I hate good enough quality, whatever that is. But how to approach quality as a concept of good translation. And that's my time, I guess. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'm happy to, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later on.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that the notion of quality, is there for education, for translation. So and it's something that is changing and evolving, thanks to and because of AI. So thank you for this clear overview of how AI is reshaping translation as a profession, as a field of research, as a field of study, so both in terms of practice and in how we train future professionals. We'll return to some of these points later in the discussion. And to conclude this round of presentation, I'd like to bring in a perspective that cuts across many of the themes we have touched on so far with Achilleas Kostoulas. He's an applied linguist and language educator at the University of Thessaly in Greece, and he's currently coordinating a major project on AI in language education for the European Centre for Modern Languages of the Council of Europe. And today he will outline a set of key principles for the ethical use of AI in language education, focusing on what it means to use these technologies in ways that are responsible, meaningful, and reflective. Achilleas, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. You can hear me, can't you? Yes, perfect. So let me just start by saying how happy I am to be with you and to sort of be able to build on all the interesting contributions that have come before. And I'll take special note of something that Marián just said, this tension between quality and efficiency. I took particular note of what you said, Marián, that if you try to speed translation up, it is no longer good quality. And I was wondering whether this same principle, the same tension, can be extended to education. Can we speed education up? And what is lost if we try to do education in a faster pace? More broadly, I'd like to start my reflection with the question, what does it really mean to use AI, quote unquote, well, in the context of language education? It can't mean just to maximize efficiency. It must be something to do with using AI in effective, ethically mindful ways. And this is really what is at the heart of our work at the European Centre of Modern Languages, where my colleagues and I have been actively involved in developing a framework of principles and guidelines that try to more or less define what this kind of ethical use of AI might mean in the context of language education again. So broadly speaking, this framework that we have been developing is a hierarchical structure, at the top of which we have 4 fundamental principles, which we think cut across many disciplines and not just language education. The first one is that the use of artificial intelligence in language education should be safe. It should be legally compliant, and at the same time it should go beyond legal compliance to ensuring that no harm is done to participants. Now, obviously, this is something that is not specific to language education, but I would venture that in language education, there are certain additional considerations that we need to be mindful of. So, for instance, many of our learners come from vulnerable positions of vulnerability. And I think it was, it must have been Alessia who talked about students in precarity, students who language education that happens in poly-crisis, students who are displaced, students who belong to minorities, and so on. Language education is not unique only in this way. It is also a field in education that is very closely connected to identity. We do ask our students to talk about themselves, to talk about their identities, to talk about their beliefs. And sometimes we do this while trying to develop their language skills, whether we are talking to a young student, to a young child, asking them to describe their home, or teaching adults English for academic purposes and telling them to discuss a politically contentious topic. Language education cuts at the cross of things that would perhaps be unwise to be very careless with when using AI. So this is one consideration, safety. The second consideration, the second principle in our framework is what we call the responsible use of AI in language education. And this again is operationalized in two guidelines. One of them is that the use of AI should be environmentally sustainable. And I will not go into this in too much depth because we all are aware of the huge carbon and water footprint of artificial intelligence. What I will focus more is the second guideline of responsible use, which is being mindful of social justice, of linguistic diversity, of digital inequalities, and so on. So this is a second broad principle we want teachers to be mindful of. The third principle is more closely grounded on educational reality. It is what we call keeping AI use in language education purposeful. And by this we mean two things. The first one is using AI in ways that we know to be pedagogically effective. And I think there are parallels here with, I think it was Ezgi who talked about keeping meaning at the core of language education. There are very many ways to use AI in order to reproduce bad teaching practices, like a multiple choice test on grammar. And it would be a shame if this increased efficiency came at the expense of pedagogical good sense. The second aspect of purposeful use of AI in language education is to do this, to make sure that language education is truly transformative, that it challenges the way we do language education, it reconfigures the setting. I'm borrowing vocabulary here from Alessia. It is about creating new affordances, new ways of teaching that were not possible or were very prohibitive in the past. And to conclude the list of principles, we expect AI use in language education to be human-centered. By this, I don't only mean keeping a human in the loop as a quality control measure. What I mean is making sure that the use of AI does not come at the expense of student well-being. So, for instance, being mindful of the fact that a language classroom is not just about drilling or practicing with a machine, it is about human connections. Language education is, in principle, about human connection, and also making sure that teachers remain on the steering wheel. Teachers remain the principal decision makers in language education. Now, all this might sound aspirational. It might sound like a huge compliance checklist, a huge list of boxes that we need to tick before we do, before we design a worksheet for our learners. And this is not at all the spirit in which this framework is created. For each of these principles and guidelines that I listed, 4 principles with 2 guidelines each, these 8 guidelines therefore, we have a list of competence descriptors, things like, for example, how can I ensure that the activities I produce with the help of AI are showcase linguistic diversity. And for each of these competence descriptors, we have a number of very specific guiding questions. And what is the point of these guiding questions? It is that we want teachers to use this collection of guidelines and competence descriptors and questions to reflect on their own practice, to think about how they use their practice, not in order to say if they do something or they don't. This is not a compliance checklist, but mostly so that out of this structured reflection, they get to build their own context-specific, situated, personalized understanding of what it means to use AI, quote unquote, well, in my context. So this list of things that will be available, we are finalizing it, it will be available by the end of the year and teachers will be able to download it, is not really there for, I don't know, teachers or directors of education to take and demand compliance. It is there to encourage reflection and to empower teachers. So this is, in a nutshell, what we have been trying to do, what we have been trying to build. Whether we have done this well or not is something that I will trust you to answer when you have seen the framework. I invite you to visit our website whenever you have the opportunity, whenever we've put things up, and see. But what I would like to do now, as I move towards the conclusion of this talk, is pose a number of questions as, I guess, seeds for a discussion. And the first one is, do we really need a domain-specific guidance framework for AI use in language education and for translation and for education in general? What is the added value of having this domain-specific guidance? Or can we trust people to find their way on their own? This is one question. I'll just load all of these questions and perhaps, Francesca, you can use these as you see fit. The second question is, this is very specific to language education, but is it a teacher's responsibility to comply with all these things, or are some of these things the job of others? Are teachers really to be responsible for ensuring that an app they use is data GDPR compliant, or is this the job of others? And can teachers offload the responsibility and say that, well, it's really not my job, it is somebody else's and I don't concern myself? And the third and final question, again, this is just food for thought. What does it mean if we fail to be ethically mindful in using AI? Who would notice, and does it matter? Again, food for thought. So I think I'll just stop here, and Francesca, I think we can move forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I mean, thank you for bringing an ethical perspective that really helps us reflect on how AI should be used in practice and how we should think of it. And thanks to all of you for these really rich and thought-provoking contributions. So we can now move into the discussion. And yes, I'll pick up on the themes that Achilleas has just raised. So we can start from there. And I saw Elif, yes. Do you want to start?
Oh, yes, please. First of all, I'd like to thank Achilleas for their great work. It is amazing and it sounds great, really. I appreciate that. Actually, I want to take his two questions, two of the three, but I request him to repeat the first question first, and then I answer, and then repeat the second question, and then I answer, because I have a kind of like rare disease that I cannot keep in mind things in the working memory so long. So can you repeat your first question, and then I'll answer that, and then I want to answer the second question. I have.
Let me see if I can remember them in the order I asked them. But the first one I think was, do we really need domain-specific guidance if AI has permeated so many different aspects of our lives? Do we need domain-specific guidance? Do we need specific guidance for language education as distinct from translation, as distinct from higher education, as distinct from other forms of education, and so on?
Yes. Let me start from there. My answer would be, of course, this wouldn't sound very scientific, but it's just my opinion that this is a definitely yes, because this is called professionalism. Otherwise, if I talk on behalf of translators without having any degree on translation, and I have a degree in translation and intercultural communication, that's why I'm talking. But if I am talking on behalf of translators, on behalf of educators, on behalf of doctors, lawyers, and like politicians, like political science experts, right? So this would be a disaster. So my answer would be a definite yes. And I am an expert for the last 8 years in universal design for learning. And it is a framework for education developed around brain sciences and learning, so which is closely connected to AI, because AI is also developed around brain science. So it is the intersection. So this is an educational framework, and I would like to read how UDL defines agency. This is the goal of UDL, by the way. It has been revised recently in 2024. UDL is revised, and the goal of UDL is to support learning agency. UDL guidelines inform the design of learning environments to support learning agency. That is the definition of CAST and UDL. Purposeful, meaning internalized self-efficacy, acting in ways that are personally and socially meaningful, which is closely aligning with your definition, your principles and guidelines. And reflective, meaning self-awareness and metacognition to identify internal motivations and external influences that support learning and make adjustments when necessary. Third, resourceful, understanding and applying assets, strengths, resources, and linguistic and cultural capital. Authentic, learner agency that is authentic, which means increasing like fidelity, increasing comprehension and deepening understanding in ways that are genuine. Strategic, setting goals and monitoring learning with intentionality and planfulness. And action-oriented, self-directed, and collective action in pursuit of learning goals. So this is another framework, the educational framework, which is implemented around the world, including Syria. I would like to extend my thanks to Alessia for her great work So I appreciate that so much. And UDL is a framework around inequalities, and it is like removing the barriers in front of learning. So this is a framework in education. So Achilleas, I'm sorry if I am mispronouncing your name. So his question was, is it necessary, is it the right thing to create frameworks domain specifically? Probably he's meaning English language teaching and translation, for example, right? And my answer was definitely yes, because what UDL has is like commonalities with Achilleas framework, but he was very specific in explaining the terms in the English language teaching context. So those specifications are exactly what educators need, ELT educators need. So my answer would be a definite yes. So we can have global frameworks in education. We can implement them in every domain, but domain-specific frameworks help us to go deeper and in detail, so that we can be more effective. Effective meaning, again, meaningful, like pedagogical. So at that point, we can talk about common European framework of reference for languages, right? What we mean by contextual AI is, so ChatGPT doesn't have common European framework of reference for languages integrated, right? So if you're using ChatGPT with your learners, you of course you have to write, right? Many of you. So in translation also, you will face the issue that the AI does not recognize the contextual detail of the English language learner's situation, right? Their context, their culture. So their framework, Achilleas and his team's framework, will bring solutions to domain-specific issues, whereas UDL brings solutions to overall educational pedagogical issues. So this is my answer to your first question. Can you repeat the second question, please?
Thank you for your input. And again, I'm not sure in which order I
okay, sorry about that.
The questions, but it was probably the one about the limits of teachers' responsibility.
Yeah.
So are teachers responsible for every aspect of AI use in their classroom, or are there things that are off limits, outside their remit, really? And put differently, can a teacher say that, well, I did read the user terms and conditions of this tool, but I can't really be responsible for how my students' data are used or misused, really, because I'm just a teacher?
Yeah, so this is a great question, actually, and this is the main focus of my talk, actually. Agency is the answer. So his question is around agency. So my belief is that there are many researchers around the world researching into the topic agency right now. With the emergence of AI technologies, it has become even more popular. But even before that, OECD was bringing the topic of agency into issue, and OECD is talking about not only teacher agency, not only learner agency. OECD is talking about co-agency. So it is all of us responsible. It is the learner's responsibility. It is the teacher's responsibility. It is the lawmaker's responsibility. It is the society's responsibility. It is the parents' responsibility all together, including the learners themselves, that we have to find our pathway to find the most effective, if we cannot come to the ideal point, but we can take our walk into the direction that we have to aim for agency of all of us. It's not only teachers' responsibility. That would be my answer. Thank you.
Let me build on this idea of agency, which came up in different ways in your talks, and several of you have emphasized how central agency is. But and my question would be, what does that actually mean in practice when working with AI, and what tends to get lost when agency is not taken into account? Maybe Ezgi, would you like to start and to share your thoughts about that? Yes.
Sorry. So I actually agree with Elif on this matter, because I'm an educator, and although I educate, I work at a state university, I work with teachers at K-12 level, and I know that they're struggling with this issue, and whether they are competent, and whether they can actually secure the data, and also whether they are doing the right thing in the classroom with their students. However, the issue is here, like Elif said, is the issue of there should be various partners in this issue: the teacher, the administrators, and also policymakers, and also the companies who actually build these tools, create these tools. They should be also creating these tools with the perspective of educators and pedagogically correct ways, and also the parents. However, there's an issue nowadays. There's an issue in Turkey about, there was a mass shooting at a school, very horrible, and there were some discussions about this, whether parents should be involved, and do the parents have a right to talk to the teachers about the students' success, grades, and some other issues. And there are two, this is a controversial topic, and there are various topics about this. Some people say that parents should be involved in all parts of the education system. However, the other part says that parents should be responsible of their children's success and the AI use, all kinds of things. We can include all of them. However, they shouldn't be involved in the decision-making process, in the especially in the curriculum, or the design of the lessons, or maybe the materials of the lessons. With the AI, I think this is a blurry line. There's a blurry line here, because it is something quite new. The parents, they don't know anything about it. Most of the parents, they don't have any idea about it. And I think AI literacy, when I included AI literacy in my talk, I really know the importance of it. And when I say AI literacy, I don't just mean it for students. I mean it for teachers, and I mean it for the general public. And I think this is a topic, a hot topic, that is debated all around the world by educators and also by the public, and we should ponder on that.
And I suppose AI literacy looks quite different in the context you were describing, Alessia. What do you think?
Definitely it is. I think also that the point you raised is fundamental, considering, of course, the broader situation in terms of education, in terms of students, learners, teachers, and so on. But if I may add another point regarding the area, the region that I'm trying to study. So in general, the Mediterranean space, the Middle East, and especially the relationship that the countries located there have with the European Union, for example. It is in terms of neighboring countries, in terms of policies directed towards the neighboring countries and the neighboring policies. The problems, I think, is that sometimes technology could be intended as a new border in terms of barriers, in terms of procedures that sometimes cannot be translated in a proper way because of the lack of responsibilities, or the lack of cooperation among the several agencies, as you previously said, especially considering the fact that agencies, of course, could be intended from one side the universities, for example, but also people who work at the universities, not only teachers, not only the administrative, but also in general all the personnel who is involved also to create this type of procedures. So the collaboration and the partnership sometimes meet some barriers, and technologies became again borders rather than facilitators. Rather than instruments that could facilitate the possibility, for example, for students to participate and to learn in some international programs like Erasmus, like other programs. And again, sometimes the lack of softwares and hardwares, of course, are again other barriers. And in this sense, I'm also trying to focus on this concept of borders that is blurred, that is not only a geographical element. At least, of course, I think that is the same in other matters, but for political scientists and international relations scholars is quite fundamental to be analyzed. But borders and barriers can be also not only physical, but they again are blurred. They could be translated into instruments that people cannot use for several reasons, for instability, for the impossibility to have the access, and so on, for economic problems, for wars. And we as and include me in the European people in terms of Italian women, we ask to neighboring countries to fulfill some procedures that sometimes are too much heavy. So there is this concept of externalization of borders, of the externalization of periphery, of the two different shores in the Mediterranean space. I mean, this is quite, I think, central, even if we consider the technological aspects.
Thank you, Alessia. I see a hand, Marián, and I was thinking that I was curious to hear how this idea of agency being distributed across different levels plays out in translation practice. I don't know if you want to say something about this, but
I first wanted to react to what Alessia said, is technology as borders and the importance of AI literacy as well. That's actually quite a important aspect in Slovakia at the moment, because Slovakia borders with Ukraine, where the war goes on, and we have a lot of Ukrainian refugees coming into Slovakia looking for help. And what's actually happening is that and it's quite a surprise that Ukraine is a bordering land with Slovakia, but we don't have more or less any translators and interpreters working with Ukrainian and Slovak. And what happened since the war started, and what's still actually happening, is that the refugees coming into Slovakia are relying on machine translation and on AI to communicate with the authorities, but also with doctors, translating sensitive materials that can even be, in a sense, harmful if translated in a wrong way. And this is really this is highlighting the aspect of technology as a border and the importance of AI literacy, because if I'm gonna call them basic people, just because they don't have the language background that we have, or the language education background, or the technology background that we have, when they use these technologies uninformed about the possible errors that can happen, the situation can only get worse, basically. Okay, and you had a question, but I'm gonna give the floor to Elif, who's who's raised their hand?
Actually, I'd like to just add something, Marián, because you raised such an important point that I have experience in translating some parents in parental meetings in the schools, public schools in the United States. They were mostly immigrants fleeing from wars or like conditions, as Alessia is working on such important topics like inequalities, running away from inequalities. And they are in the public schools, and mostly teachers have misconception of not knowing English with having like learning disabilities. So some of those students are categorized as special ed just because they cannot speak language, so which is causing inequalities. So at that point, Marián, your point is so critical in education, at the intersection of education and translation. And I have met some translators who are not very knowledgeable about the context of education, coming from medical background or other backgrounds, so they don't know the educational terms that those students are categorized wrongly into special ed. Actually, their problem was just they were ESLs, English language learners. So correct translation, through correct translation, I was able to help those parents and support their education, because in that context, especially in that context, Marián raised a very good point that translation is a slow process. And Achilleas added to that the question, the critical question that, is education the same? So does it apply to education? Education is a slow process. So I would like to comment on both questions. Yes, education should be a slow process. You cannot speed up the categorization of students as language learners, their levels actually. And adding to Alessia's points, so if we talk about technology removing inequalities, we have to consider technology bringing new inequalities as well. So that was my point. Thank you, Marián, Achilleas, and Alessia for bringing up those critical points to the discussion.
Yeah, and again, I think that in this framework, again, the idea of agency is crucial and is key, especially the idea of agency being distributed across different levels and being shared in a way. And yes, I'm curious to hear how this plays out in translation practice, where workflows and constraints are also evolving, and where we have different people working together to achieve the same objective. So we have the client, we have the translator, we have the proofreader, or we have the machine translation system, and we have the post editor, and then we have the final check. Marián, do you want to say something about that? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm thinking to how to approach this. The basic premise and the basic, I'm not sure if it's correct to call it a problem, the basic thing with these engines and the way they are trying to speed the process of translation up, or the process of post editing up, is that those people who need to be quick, who need to be sped up, so the translators at the bottom, more or less, are forced to kinda adjust. So either they adjust their workflows, or they will be put out of their work, maybe. They're gonna lose work because they are expected to be fast, which is an economic problem, of course. It's an ethical problem. It's a huge ethical problem as well. And that's why this kind of interference or education should come probably from the bottom lines from the translators to raise AI literacy questions. And there was a great publication a few years back by Lynn Bolker about machine translation literacy, which I read as a client. It opens your eyes that, okay, what I want from my translators, the way I imagine this, is from their perspective actually not doable in a way that will satisfy my needs for quality, for example, or whatever that is. And if we had such frameworks or such ways of thinking or such ways of educating our clients, and again, going back to also what Achilleas said about having frameworks for translators done by translators, would definitely be beneficial for the whole translation as a process, probably. And I'm not sure whether I answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was thinking that, again, the issue of quality and of skills and new competencies, are there. So I was thinking that we should really reimagine the way we teach translation competencies, and the importance of translation competencies, because sometimes we think that since AI is there, then the basic skills are not needed anymore, but it's actually the other way around. I mean, the basic skills are the core of the issue.
It's again, if a translator can't do a translation from scratch, then how can they post-edit a machine translation if they don't know how a proper translation would look like?
Absolutely. And I think that the most concrete example of this and of the importance of skills when using AI is the prompt. I mean, the prompt is the product of the human skills. I mean, if you want to write a prompt and you want the chatbot to do something for you, you need to know those things, because otherwise it's impossible to, to write a prompt and to make ChatGPT do whatever you want. So yeah, a lot of interesting things, and this has been a really rich discussion. I think we touched on many of the key issues around AI in language education and translation. If you all agree, I think I'd now like to open the floor to questions from the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, you can either raise your hand or write it in the chat. While we give the audience a moment to think, I'd be curious to hear if anyone has a question for one of the other speakers. Otherwise, I'm happy to bring in another question myself. But I don't know if you have a question for one of the other speakers. Yes, Elif.
Francesca, while we are waiting for the question, I would like to say something about your phrasing, very well phrasing of distribution of agency. And this is a very critical point, because at different levels and at different contexts, we need different distribution of agency. For example, age level is a critical point to consider here. But to what degree students should be responsible of their usage, at what age, and under what context, right? For example, the context that Alessia is bringing about, like in the context of vulnerabilities, people are tackling with so many issues, so many challenges, that they may not be able to take the responsibility of their AI usage themselves. So they may need more agency by other parties, right? So it depends on the context. It depends on age level, education level, background, and cultural context, I think. And what OECD suggests here is a collective agency. I like the term collective agency. but the distribution of this collective agency depends on the context. And about Marián's speech, I want to add something. The iceberg analogy. Contextual AI has some good news for translators and educators, because contextual AI figures out that the issue cannot be solved with machines alone. So we need a robust collaboration between stakeholders, like in our context, between translators, teachers, and AI. So only a robust collaborative effort can create the best results. So it has like 3 steps usually defined. So while in step 1, creating authentic data, which means that teachers, interpreters input global English corpora and real-world examples, and in the English teaching context, like Common European framework of references. And then in the step 2, AI steps in and generates what we ask for. And the contextual AI is the new step from prompt engineering to context engineering. So you may research into that. So there is not prompt engineering anymore, because it is rule-based and like algorithmic based, which is not solving our inequalities and issues. So there is the new term contextual prompting, contextual engineering. And then the next step, finalizing part, is again human step in, and this is called human validation. Teachers and translators act as interpreters, aligning outputs with local cultural contextual realities. So I wanted to add these to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Elif. Before we move back to the audience, I don't know if there are questions. I see that the chat is not active, so I'm sorry I said that you can also write your questions on the chat, but the chat is not active. I don't know, Valentina, if I'm wrong, but I don't see the chat, so I think they can't use it. My fault.
I see the chat, like I can write in the chat, but I don't know.
Okay, because I see the chat is not available, so maybe it's because we are not the organizers.
For example, it's not available for me. It's
okay, so maybe for external. Okay, okay.
Yeah, only team members can reach, have access
so.
to the chat.
Okay, I will try if I can change that, but I don't know if.
No worries, Valentina. No problem. Well, I'd like to ask one final question before concluding our seminar. Looking ahead, what do you see as the most urgent issue we should be paying attention to when working with AI in language education and in translation? Maybe we can do a quick round, just a brief thought from each of you, and we'll keep it fairly concise so we have time then to for questions, if any, from the audience. Maybe Achilleas, we can start with you, and then I'd be interested to hear from the others as well.
Thank you. This is a very thought-provoking question. I think that I would focus on this question of co-agency, which has been brought up, and it seems to be at the background of everyone's thinking. So I think it would be a fairly urgent priority to better understand exactly what this means and exactly how co-agency emerges from the actions of many different agents. The danger would be that without a well understood or a very, if we do not theorize this sufficiently, an under-theorized understanding of co-agency could lead to this situation where everybody is responsible, but nobody really is. So we need to really move from to develop this, to develop and communicate to the broad audience exactly what co-agency means in more practical terms. At least that is one priority that I think is important.
Thank you very much. Ezgi, what do you think?
Well, firstly, I'd like to mention the three important, most critical competencies we need to have as educators and also teachers, practitioners today. Critical AI literacy is the first one, and then we need to have pedagogical intentionality, and also thirdly, I would like to talk about tolerance for productive struggle. So both in teachers and learners, the ability, the ability to resist the pull of convenience, to sit with difficulty, to recognize that the friction is the point. And that's the whole, the point of competency that AI most directly threatens, and which therefore is the one we most need to protect. And when we look at the focus on the most pressing issue looking ahead, it's the gap between policy ambition and classroom reality. As a teacher, I experience it a lot. We have PISA, 2029 preparing to assess AI literacy globally, as I mentioned in my talk, and we have frameworks from OECD, UNESCO, the European Commission. Okay, the ambition is real. Okay, but according to Thessaly 2024, which tells us that 3/4 of teachers who aren't using AI say they lack the knowledge and skills to do so. So they lack the competency, that they don't feel prepared. And AI is their single highest professional development need, which comes to the topic of teacher education at university level, and then in service teaching, training sessions. We're building the runway while the plane is already in the air. So the most pressing issue isn't the technology, it's the human infrastructure around it. So and also whether the schools, the institutions will invest in teachers seriously enough and quickly enough to make any of this work.
Thank you very much. Alessia, what do you think?
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you for your very timing, question, because I'm trying to give like a policy recommendation, I would say, in terms of using artificial intelligence and technology, because I think that the problems, the main challenge related to this is that we as civil society, but they as policymaker, are trying to catch up with the artificial intelligence in terms of regulation, in terms of imposing regulation. And we are seeing what is happening with, for example, the IA Act or the Omnibus regarding the European Union, or the other regulation and agreements from the United States, China, and so on and so forth. So we are trying to impose a way to the artificial intelligence to be dominated. While this is a transition, a digital transition, one of the digital transition, one part of the wider digital transition, that indeed needs to be understood, first of all, in terms of, as the others said, in terms of agency, in terms of the role of the involvement of education, in terms of, for the education, in terms of the student-centered approach. So the main challenge is not to regulate, but to understand which type of new jobs artificial intelligence will create from one side. And this is quite central to educate people, to add quality to education, rather than be worried about which type of jobs the artificial intelligence will eradicate, will eliminate in the future. So the point maybe is quite different. We are experiencing sometimes policy makers or bodies or institutions that are trying to entangle so much instruments that could be, of course, yes, challenges, but also opportunities. So I think that is maybe the main problem.
Thank you, Alessia. Now, Elif and then Marián, would you like to add something? So the original question was, you know, the most urgent issues that we should be tackling and that we should, you know, address. I think your mic is not on.
Sorry about that. Do you hear me right now? Do you hear me right now? Okay.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I would like to end with good news in terms of AI, because, you know, AI is mainly developed in the United States, and the news spreads so fast here and then around the world. So the news is that around the fact that we need to improve skills, focus on skills that Alessia, Achilleas, Ezgi, and Marián mentioned, and Francesca, you also mentioned, we need to focus on them because we need human skills more. There is the iceberg metaphor going around right now. Above the iceberg, let me tell you, describe the iceberg metaphor. Above the surface of AI domain, we have the keyword speed. Yes, it will be so fast. Pattern of recognition. Yeah, it recognizes so fast. It is surface level syntax, vocabulary matching, everything. So it is so fast. But below the surface of the iceberg, the humans are directing to more human domain, like nuanced cultural subtleties, ethical implications, deep sociolinguistic realities, legal, medical, educational, pedagogical liabilities. So this is under the iceberg part of the iceberg metaphor. So if we have the bottom part that big, so we need to focus on the skills that OECD Learning Compass 23 implies. So it implies collaborative agency, as Achilleas also mentioned. So how OECD defines collaborative agency or co-agency? It defines that it is the agency where students, teachers, parents, and the community work together, because the aim of education is to provide students with the tools they need to realize their potential. So potential is our common goal, right? So we all want to realize people's potential. So Alessia is working in a very sensitive context. So they want those vulnerable communities to realize their potential under harsh conditions. And the others, right? We are all working towards realizing human potential so that the world will be a better place for all of us, not for just those who can access to those technologies. So in the broader education ecosystem, so we have the new term that meaning-focused ecosystem. So education goals are shared not only among students and teachers, but also with parents and wider community. So in a way that students can find the tools they need to thrive, not only in school, but also at home and in their communities, right? So in this context, everyone can be considered a learner, not only students in schools or in formal education settings, but we are all learners as teachers, as translators, as managers, as lawmakers, as parents and communities. So we should all work together. Of course, the distribution of agency should be different at different levels and contexts, but we should be aware of what AI is bringing to our world, to our future, and to our schools and translation worlds. So we should be all aware so that we can manage it we can keep humans at the center.
Thank you, Elif. And you shared with Alessia this issue of community in your answers. So thank you very much. Marián, what do you think about the most urgent issue we should be paying attention to when working with AI?
That really is a difficult question.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to approach it from a broader perspective, not just language teaching or translation, and also kind of like, I'm going to probably use a cliche, and I'm sorry, but we cannot forget and we need to think of responsibility. Not only responsible AI use, but also responsible AI development, for example, because it has huge impacts on the ecosystem, on human labor as well, and we should always think of what I tell my students when we are talking about using AI. I always tell them, like, before you ask the machine a dumb question that you could have simply Googled, you remember that whenever you use a prompt, you just you burn a tree in a rainforest. So do we really need to use it for everything? And will we be responsible and will we be accountable for the effect that these technologies will have in the long term? Let's not think about, okay, it's going to help me now in this moment, but what's the butterfly effect for the future as well? So I believe we should not, and a crucial aspect is responsibility. That shouldn't be forgotten.
Thank you so much. I have like other 10, 20 questions, but I think we'll have to stop here due to time. Thank you again to all our speakers for this, I think, very stimulating exchange, and to all of you for joining us today. It's been great to have such a large audience. And many thanks to Anna Mongibello again and to I-LanD for this seminar series. With our speakers, I'm sure we'll have other opportunities to continue this exchange very soon. And again, thank you very much. Thank you, Achilleas. Thank you, Marián. Thank you, Alessia. Thank you, Elif. And thank you, Ezgi, for being with us and for sharing your work with us. And thank you to I-LanD for this. Valentina, I don't know if we have other practicalities or other things to say, but otherwise, I think we can stop here.
Yes, I would like to thank all the speakers on behalf of I-LanD. I did have some questions, but then in your discussions, you answered the questions, and so I think that is also a testament of the quality of the speakers and what they had to say today. So thank you. Just a final reminder that we have another seminar in May. It's going to be about identity in naming practices, and I will leave a link in the chat with the website for the I-LanD Center. So if you wanna look at it, if you wanna write to I-LanD or be added to our mailing list, you can find all the information there. And thank you again to all the speakers.
Chat. We cannot
you
use
cannot
chat on
not
our
even
site.
my message, because I did send them. Oh, you cannot. Okay.
Well, I can share with them myself the link, so
Okay.
no problem.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again to all of you for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
See
you,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.